Hello, everyone. I hope you're all staying healthy and you have a safe place that you're hanging out during our quarantine time. So, we're going to get right into chapter 19. It's our next chapter. It's all about blood. So, what I'd like to do is just go through some things and then we'll get to handout number 19A and cover that in this video. So if you look at our chapter here, we've got a couple of things to introduce. First of all, when we think about fluids in our body, all right, we're going to have two major fluids. We're going to have blood, which is what we're going to talk about this in this chapter. And then we have this thing called interstitial fluid. Now, interstitial fluid is the fluid between the cells of tissues. So you can think of it as tissue fluid, all right? So what happens is blood is going to transport nutrients, hormones, that kind of thing. But not all cells are right next to the blood. So blood has to transfer that material and then move it into the interstitial fluid. So let's imagine we're carrying glucose, for example. Glucose is going to move through the bloodstream, but then it's going to leave the bloodstream and go into the interstitial fluid where it can be absorbed or moved into the cells. So it says nutrients and oxygen diffuse from the blood into the interstitial fluid and then into the cells themselves. So a lot of tissues like epithelium, they're not really close to the bloodstream. So anything that moves into the cells has to move into the interstitial fluid first. Now, of course, waste products are going to move the opposite direction. So a cell is going to metabolize, make a bunch of waste, and then that waste is going to be transported out of the cell into the interstitial fluid and then into the bloodstream. All right, pretty cool. Okay, so let's look at the functions of blood really quick. So you pretty much know that blood is going to be transporting stuff, right? So transportation, we're going to move waste products, we're going to move nutrients, we're going to move oxygen. We can transport and redistribute heat, that kind of thing. Blood is also a regulation center. So we can regulate things like pH. So if your body gets too acidic or too basic, we can regulate that. We can regulate body temperature. So, if you get too hot and get all flush, right, that's because the heat is being dissipated out of your body by dilated blood vessels. We can also regulate water content in our blood. So if we don't have enough water or if we have too much water, the blood can transport that water and get rid of it. And then, of course, our third main function of blood is protection. And we have white blood cells that fight off pathogens and foreign agents. And so those are circulating in the blood as well. All right. So next we have the physical characteristics of blood. I'm not too worried about this. It's kind of interesting that it has a pH that's right around neutral. It's slightly basic. If you were to drain all the blood out of a body, it makes up about 8% of our body weight. This is kind of what's interesting. Our blood volume. Men tend to be a little bit larger than women, so we have a little bit more blood than you ladies. But if we kind of average this out, the average person is going to have about 5 liters of blood. All right? So that's 5 Nalgene bottles full of blood. All right. So let's get into a little bit of handout 19A. I want to cover 19A in this video. So here we are. And to do that, I'm just going to show you, like I would in class, the different handouts. So I'm going to switch over here to the handout, and we'll be able to go over the handout just like we would in class. So if we look at this, it says components of blood. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I don't have as much of a sophistication of technology as I do in the classroom, but we'll make this work. All right, so components of blood. Now, I've got a bunch of stuff written on here, but ignore it for now. Like, just ignore all this stuff. Let's look at the left-hand side. All right, so if I zoom into the left-hand side, this is our entire body. So down here at the bottom it says body weight. So our entire body weight. I just mentioned that blood makes up about 8% of our body weight, or our, so if you weighed 100 pounds, 8 pounds of your body would be blood. All right. That leaves 92% for everything else. Now, what we're going to concentrate on is blood. So forget this other 92%. That's all the other stuff. If we look at whole blood is broken into two parts. All right? It's broken into blood plasma, which is the liquid part of your blood. And then it's broken into cells. All right, so let's first just talk about the blood plasma. I'm going to zoom into blood plasma. This is the liquid part of your blood. So anytime someone is talking about blood plasma, oh, so-and-so had a blood plasma transfusion. That is the liquid part of our blood. It makes up about 55% of the blood volume. It's broken into several different things. All right. So it's broken into proteins, water, and other stuff. All right. Now, most of our blood plasma, the liquid part, it's a liquid because it's mostly water. So 92% of our water, or of our plasma, is water. Then about 7% is made out of proteins. What are those proteins? Well, they're things like albumins, globulins, fibrinogen, and then some other proteins that may be carried through the blood. Albumins are regulatory proteins. Globulins are proteins that are involved in our immune system. Fibrinogen we'll talk about a little bit later in this class, and that deals with blood clotting. All right. And then our other solutes, other things that are carried in the bloodstream, are not proteins. So things like electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chlorine, electrolytes, or ions. Nutrients, in other words, glucose, sugar. Some gases are carried in the blood plasma, like CO2, a little bit of O2. Regulatory substances like hormones. And then, of course, waste products. This says urea. So these are all things that are being transported by the liquid part of our blood. Solutes, remember, are dissolved in the water. So all of these electrolytes, nutrients, hormones, they may be dissolved within that water part of our blood. Okay, now the crux of this chapter is going to be the cells. And so I want to mention these cells, and I could actually kill two birds with one stone with this handout here, but I'll come back to the functions of these cells in a different video. But formed elements are just cells, all right? So these formed elements are all the cells of the blood. Now, if we break them down, there are three types of cells. We have red blood cells, or erythrocytes. We have white blood cells, or leukocytes. And then we have platelets, which are technically called thrombocytes. Now, most of our cells in the blood, 99%, are going to be erythrocytes, red blood cells. All right? The others constitute very little. So these numbers right here, it says 4.8 to 5.4 million. This is per drop of blood. So we can just round this off and say we have about 5 million red blood cells per drop of blood. If we compare that to white blood cells, the cells that are going to be immune cells, we only have 5,000 to 10,000 per drop. Very, very small amount compared to the red blood cells. Then we have our platelets. The platelets are going to be involved in blood clotting. They're called thrombocytes. All right. So we have these erythrocytes that make up most of our blood. We have platelets anywhere from 1 to 250,000 to 400,000 per drop of blood. They're going to be blood clotting. And then we have our leukocytes, which are white blood cells. And they're broken into their own categories. So these are the white blood cells. We actually have, for this class, we're going to talk about, we have 6 different kinds of white blood cells. Neutrophils, basophils, eosinophils, monocytes, and then there are 2 types of lymphocytes, T cells and B cells. And we're going to talk about those a little bit later in the chapter. All right, so I'm going to zoom out on this a little bit so you can see the whole thing. And this takes care of our first handout, 19A. All right, so let's go back to this view. And so next we'll be talking about handout 19B. And so we're going to make that a different video. So peace out. Have a good day.